Hello and welcome back. I'm standing here today with a 2022 Mini Cooper SE, the all-electric Mini Cooper. This guy has a 32.6 kilowatt hour battery pack. Of that, 28.9 kilowatt hour is usable. And I just used all those 28.9 kilowatt hour doing a 70-mile-an-hour highway range test for Inside EVs. That video is up on the Inside EVs YouTube channel, so check that out if you're interested. Now that we have the battery down to zero, we're gonna do a full 0 to 100% DC fast charge recording on this 150 kilowatt Electrify America DC fast charger. Now the peak charging rate on the Mini Cooper SE is only 50 kilowatt. So we should relatively quickly get up to 50 kilowatt and hold that for most of the charging session until around 75%. That's when the Cooper SE starts ramping down. As always, we're gonna make our charts and graphs, analyze the heck out of it, see the strengths and weaknesses of the Mini Cooper SE's DC fast charging capabilities. I mean, we already know it only pulls in 50 kilowatts. That's very low, but this is a really small battery pack. With only 29 kilowatt hours of usable energy, you really can't pump in that much more power. I mean, they may have been able to accept 75 or 80 kilowatts for a short period of time, but really wouldn't have made that big of a difference. So with these really small battery electric vehicles, you're not gonna get much more than 50 kilowatts pumped into the pack anyway. Next up, we're gonna watch the full recording and we'll see just how good of a charging vehicle the Mini Cooper SE is. But first, please don't forget, click that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, give me a like on this video, all that good stuff, so you don't miss any upcoming content here on State of Charge. Now I want to remind everyone before we jump into the recording, DC fast charging is the fastest way to recharge your electric vehicle, but it isn't always the most convenient, and it definitely isn't the least expensive way. The least expensive way to charge your EV is at home. You're going to pay a lot less for the electricity, and most EV owners are going to elect to recharge at home for their daily charging needs. It's the most convenient way to recharge your vehicle, and quite honestly, it's the best way to alleviate range anxiety. You need to recharge your EV at a DC fast charger when you're on long road trips, but for daily charging, nothing beats charging at home. The EV charges while you're sleeping. You wake up with a full battery every morning. And I like to remind everybody, for home charging, make sure you hire a qualified, licensed, and insured electrician to install your charging equipment at home. And that's why I've partnered with Qmerit. Qmerit is North America's leading provider for electric vehicle charging installations. And quite honestly, they've been at it longer than anyone and have the most experience. So you can see how Qmerit can help you with your home charging installation needs by following the link in the description of this video. Okay, so first I want to apologize for the terrible sun glare in the video. I'm working on what will hopefully be a permanent solution to that for future videos. So less than a minute after plugging in, the Cooper SE is pulling 43 kilowatt. In 10 minutes, we're at 25% state of charge, and the charge rate is up to 45 kilowatt. It starts a gradual climb up. And after 15 minutes, we're at 36% state of charge and still holding a charge rate of 45 kilowatt. Now, after 20 minutes of charging, we're at 50% state of charge, and we're now charging at 47 kilowatt. And after 25 minutes of charging, the Cooper SE is now at 62% state of charge, and the charge rate has crept up to 48 kilowatt. After 29 minutes of charging, we're at 72% state of charge, and we finally reached the Cooper SE's maximum charge rate of 50 kilowatt. But it only holds it for about 30 seconds, because this is the point when the charge rate starts to ramp down as the state of charge reaches a high percentage. This happens with all electric vehicles. DC fast charging isn't as linear as it typically is for level 1 and level 2 charging. We reach 80% state of charge after 33 minutes of charging, and it's accepting 33 kilowatt of power. After 40 minutes, the Cooper SE is at 88% state of charge. And after 50 minutes, we're at 95%, and charging is now at level 2 charging speeds. We're only pulling 9 kilowatt. So here you can see why we always recommend unplugging from a DC fast charger once you've reached like 80 or 90%. And that's because the charging rate slows down so much, it just isn't worth the wait. However, with a short-range EV like the Cooper SE, you may need every mile you can get just to make it to your destination. So if you really want or really have to wait to reach 100%, you're going to need to sit there a while because it takes 23 more minutes to go from 95% state of charge to 100% state of charge, as the Cooper E is finally topped off after 75 minutes of charging. All right, so as I said, it took 75 minutes to finish. That is 1 hour and 15 minutes. The charging station dispensed 31.98 kilowatt hour. As I mentioned earlier, Mini Cooper SE has a 32.6 kilowatt hour battery pack. That's the total capacity. Of that, 28.9 kilowatt hour is usable. So we had about 10% charging losses between the 28.9 kilowatt hour usable pack and the 31.9 kilowatt hour that the station delivered. 10% charging losses is pretty average for what we see with electric vehicle charging. Now, as far as the price, for some reason, there was a network issue, as you can see here on the right-hand side, and it didn't display the total price. The price to charge was $9.61, but in New Jersey, we have to pay tax on that. So I was billed $10.24 for this full charging session. All right, so next up, let's take a look at my charts. As usual, I have the charging power chart, which shows the full charging curve, and the time to charge chart. So we could take a look at how long you have to stay to add a certain amount of miles to your Cooper SE. And I have a little bonus. I had the Cooper SE for a full week, so I did another DC fast charge recording, that time from 10 to 80%. Because quite honestly, very few people are ever going to charge from 0 to 100% like I did in that recording. We just do that to map out the whole charging curve. More frequently, people are going to stop at around 10% and plug in and maybe charge up to 80% and leave. So I have that data from that charging session also, which will overlay and see how the two charging sessions compare. All right, so let's take a look at the charging power chart, which shows us the charging curve. This is actually a beautiful charging curve. You can see here, as soon as we plug in, it jumps up to about 43 kilowatt. Then it starts this slow climb all the way up to about 73% state of charge, where it just gradually increases up to the point where it hits the peak charging rate of 50 kilowatt. Now, if you take a look at the chart, the line actually never touches 50 kilowatt. That's because it didn't hold 50 kilowatt charge rate for more than about 30 seconds. So we don't really count it as officially reaching it for the chart. It has to hold that charging power for like a minute at least for us to consider it reaching. But here at the 73% state of charge point, it starts the perfect line down to 100% again. I mean, this charging curve is actually perfect. Too bad it's at such a low charging rate. If this peaked at like 150 or 175 kilowatt, and then this whole charging curve looked this way, it would really be like one of the nicest charging curves we've ever seen. Kind of like the Audi e-tron, which has a really similar charging curve. It holds that charge rate for a long time before it starts to climb down to 100%. So now we're going to take a look at the 10 to 80% overlay and see how similar it is. All right, well, as you can see, it doesn't get any better than that. Perfect repetition. We plug in at 10%, it jumps up to about 43, 44 kilowatt immediately, and it holds that line right up to just about the same point. I think it held it for another minute or so. As you can see here, this little point at the end where it's charging at the higher rate for a minute longer, but then it follows down along the same exact line as we saw with the 0 to 100% charging session. So next, let's take a look at the charging time graph. On the x-axis, it's how many minutes we're charging for, and on the y-axis, we see the vehicle's state of charge. After 10 minutes of charging, we're at 25% state of charge. After 20 minutes of charging, 50%. After 30 minutes of charging, 75%. You can see a pattern there, right? Because we had such a linear charging curve, we had the same miles per minute added all the way up to 30 minutes. So after 40 minutes of charging, we're at 88% state of charge. 50 minutes, we're at 95% state of charge. And after an hour and 15 minutes, we hit 100%. Now let's talk about how many miles per minute are adding. And I'm going to focus here on the 0 to 80% part of the charging session, because after 80%, it slows down so much. As I said earlier, it's really not worth waiting. So it takes 33 minutes to get to 80%. If you use the EPA's range rating of 110 miles per charge, that's adding 88 miles, and that would average 2.66 miles of range added for every minute charging. If you use my 70-mile-an-hour highway range test where I went 103 miles, that would add 82 miles of range, and what we're talking about in that instance is adding 2.48 miles of range for every minute of charging. Next up, let's take a quick look at the comparison between the 0 to 100 and 10 to 80% charging sessions on the time to charge chart. Now, as you can tell, they're nearly perfectly parallel. You get the same amount of miles added per minute from the 10% to 80%. And when you're plugging in at 10% and arriving at 80%, it's going to take you 29 minutes. So little less than a half an hour for you to charge from 10% to 80%, which is 70% of your battery pack, and add somewhere between 75 and 77 miles of driving range. All right, well, that's a wrap on our Mini Cooper SE DC fast charging analysis. We hope you learned a little bit about the Cooper SE's DC fast charging capability. Before we go on, to remind everybody, if you are installing home electric vehicle charging equipment, please follow the link to Qmerit in the description of this video and let the professionals do your home charging installation. It really isn't the type of job that you want to do on your own. You want a licensed and insured, qualified electrician to install your EV charging equipment, and Qmerit is definitely the place I recommend that you check out. So don't forget, please click that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any upcoming content here on State of Charge.